the number of crashes per driver state the fact that minus 15%.
So, Nick, the crisis is ravaging around the world. What do you think that the risk management profession should do to improve their action in the future, building on the crisis, lessons learned?
Well, Mattia, you're right to stress the lessons learned. I think the crisis involves losses on a scale which it's quite difficult to imagine was predicted by risk managers. In other words, we have probably got a great deal to learn. That is to say, we didn't predict that losses would amount to 1.8 trillion at this stage in the cycle. So that's the bad news, but I don't think this means one should conclude that risk management has in some sense completely failed. I think there are many lessons to be learned, and maybe to some extent we should draw a lesson from the car industry in which people add extra safety features to cars. They make them much more effective at surviving crashes and indeed at avoiding crashes. But the consequence is, of course, that people drive the cars faster. And maybe to some extent this lesson is one in which we've been driving a little bit faster, and maybe we've got beyond even our more up-to-date safety features.
Moving on to the regulatory response, there is a lot of activism from the regulators these days. Do you think that they are heading in the right direction with these measures?
Well, the right direction, it's difficult to tell quite which direction they're going to go, I think. So far, when we think about risk managers and what they've been talking about in terms of what's in regulators' heads, over the last little while, we've all been talking about Basel II. I think it's obvious we will get something, whether it's packaged as Basel III, but we will get a new regulatory regime or some addition to it. And at the moment I see quite a lot of nostalgia, a yearning for some of the simple ratios of the past. I certainly remember when I first came into banking, people used to talk about the loan-to-deposit ratio, and we knew back in those days that if the loan-to-deposit ratio was more than 100%, this is a very bad thing. Now, obviously, in the recent past, the development of wholesale banking markets has made that sort of ratio a thing of the past. But I think people will be looking at that again, and I think they'll also be looking at more simple, straightforward equity to assets, as the US regulators have for some little while. So I think it's a bit too early to predict quite where the regulators are going to go, but they are going to create some new rules for us. But I'm sure the industry will be able to work with them and accommodate whatever they come up with.
Finally, I would be interested in your view on a technical question. Do you think that models have been misused in the crisis?
Well, I think that is an interesting question. I've been slightly wary of the quantitative input into risk management for a little while. It's clearly valuable. Models are clearly very useful. But there are some rules such as if you don't already know the answer, you probably shouldn't be running the model. Sounds paradoxical, but in essence it's saying that you shouldn't use the model to invent an answer where you don't have a sense of what it is already. You can use a model to illuminate your understanding. And I suspect that particularly among those who don't have a good quantitative background, that models have seemed to offer more certainty than in reality they provided. They're such an attractive shorthand way of conveying risk that we've sometimes allowed ourselves to be misled and have something of an illusion of control, and obviously that control has been shown recently to be illusory.